Hello, my name is Sean Abbas, and I'm the president and co-founder of Threads. A lot of people ask me where Threads came from, where the idea came from, and I always have to tell them the story. The idea for Threads was born on a day like any other day. It's a day probably exactly like you've had in the past as well. A supervisor came and knocked on my door and requested to fire an employee. And how he requested to fire the employee I thought was pretty interesting. He said that he needed to fire the employee. And I asked him to come in and we sat down and talked about it. He proceeded to explain to me that he had an employee who was very talented, in fact one of the best he'd ever seen at his job, who had an extremely poor attitude, wouldn't work and help support others, and was unwilling to accept any new change that he was trying to bring into the department. He said that this person impacted negatively his ability to lead. I asked him how he'd communicated this to him, and he said that he'd done it verbally and he'd also done it in his performance review. And I called Human Resources and I asked him to bring down the performance review documents for this employee. As I began to look through those documents, I thumbed through 3 or 4 pages of boilerplate and sentences that had little meaning. I was looking for that score on the back page. And as you might imagine, that score said meeting expectations. I asked him at that point, how do you think it's fair to tell an employee that they're meeting expectations and then turn around and fire them no more than 3 weeks later? To me, that sounds more like a failure to communicate than it does something that's the employee's problem. He took the review from my hands and he gave me a very important lesson. He showed me in this document where he had rated this employee a 1 in attitude, a 1 in teamwork, a 1 in willingness to accept change, a 1 in training and helping to onboard new employees. At the same time, he'd rated him very high in other areas, but in the performance review process, we average those things together. We take behaviors and we take skills and we average them together. We don't do that anywhere else in life, but in the performance review. And it's not really how we judge people, is it? At that point, I told him that we were not going to fire the employee that day, that we were going to find a better way to communicate what was important to us. And for the next 3 days, I began to investigate a process and look into a process that would forever change the way I manage people and the way our business conducted and the way our leaders led. We acknowledged for the first time that how we behave and our values are just as important as what we do for our job, and that things are equal in those contexts, and that one can never overrule the other, and that they're never to be averaged together. We talked about it and we agreed that this was fair, it was honest, it was what people expected from us. We brought the employee in and we communicated with him differently the first time. And his response wasn't what we expected. He was angry. He said things to us like, "You don't pay me to treat people nice, you pay me to do my job." And I stuck to my guns and I said, no, indeed, we are changing what those expectations are specifically. You're required to do both things now. It's not one average with the other anymore. And he quit. He pounded his fist down on the table, insisted that that's not for him, and he walked out the door. And we all looked at each other with a little bit of shock. And the supervisor said this to me. He said, "It worked." He said, "For the first time, you see what I saw every single day. And you see what the employees that worked with this person saw 10 times a day. And for the first time, I think you can understand the impact that it had on our culture." And he was right. From that day, we changed the way we viewed people, the way we measured them, and the expectations that we had of them. What happened next was to be easily expected. The culture in that area absolutely exploded. People helped one another. People were going out of their way to do things the right way, the way we wanted to see things done, where they're focused on leadership and helping people be all that they can be. We learned on that day that that is what really matters. That's what leaders do. At Threads, our vision is a world without performance reviews. Our goal is to help managers, companies, and leaders focus first and foremost on culture.